Ladies and gentlemen, very welcome again and good morning. Welcome to that first workshop for countries, session according to countries. We'll start with the United Kingdom, and I am with Katherine DEVLIN. Good morning. You are the president of the Association of Industry, e-cigarette industry of in the UK. So first, we'll have a point on the British situation.
I may slip. Been in Paris too long.
On regarde on a une petite vidéo avant votre présentation.
We have a small video before your intervention.
Voilà, de retour sur le plateau du VAP Expo pour parler du Royaume-Uni. Peut-être en introduction, Catherine, un petit mot par rapport à cet événement aujourd'hui.
Sorry, first of all, should you tell us a little bit about the UK situation? What's the difference between vaping in the UK and in France?
So this event is absolutely breathtaking. This venue and everything that's gone into this, thank you so much for making it possible for this to happen. These sorts of events are so important because it gives us all an opportunity to compare notes and see how we're all doing in this massive fight that we're all engaged in. And as far as the differences between the UK and France goes, I don't really see that much difference. I think one of the stands says, you know, we are family, we are fumily, we are vapidly, we are all together in one fight here. And we all have the same goal and the same ambitions, and we want the same thing. So I think the more we can work together, the better. And it's a fantastic event. Well done.
Merci, thank you.
In order to introduce your presentation, you have here given us the it is an overview, a PowerPoint document, and you'll have the opportunity to discuss with the audience, and also you can, interrupt yourself and answer to the questions, and we'll see, what has been done in the previous years. So 2 million vapers in the UK. It is quite the same situation as in France. UK and France are the main countries in terms of users in Europe. Yeah.
Obviously, the States is quite a long way ahead of us, but I think France and the UK are very much leading the sort of vanguard of the revolution that's happening here with vaping, definitely.
C'est l'entente cordiale.
I hope so.
On regarde.
Okay, so really briefly, just to make sure that there's time for questions and interactions, I just have a few slides just to give some ideas about what kind of data we have available. We're very lucky in the UK that we have great organizations that gather data and put it out there so that we can monitor what's happening. And we do have a situation in the UK where electronic cigarettes have been recognized as not being the same as tobacco cigarettes. They don't contain tobacco, and their use is not considered to be the same as smoking. ASH, Action on Smoking and Health, have been, initially they were quite reticent. They wanted to see them as medicines, but now they are recognizing that actually these could be a really significant force for good. And as you can see, they plotted the usage amongst adult smokers in Britain to where we are now, which is very similar to the data that you had on your presentation there. that crucially, of course, they're always interested in the gateway idea, this notion that someone's going to start on an e-cig and transfer over to cigarettes. We know it's ludicrous, but there we are. It is, one of the risks that's often highlighted by professionals, that there could be this gateway effect. But ASH frequently comes out and says that, the current evidence suggests that this phenomenon is not occurring. Among children and young people, current electronic cigarette use is confined almost entirely to those who've already tried smoking. So yes, there are some young people using e-cigarettes, but almost exclusively they are all smokers. So that maybe is a good thing, but who knows? So again, they put a press release out just very recently, just last week, showing that still only 1.8% of children are regular users, and 90% of the regular or occasional users are smokers or now ex-smokers. This was a really interesting finding, that 91% of young people haven't tried them even once, despite the fact that over 80% of young people are now aware of them, which is a significant increase since 2013.
Et là, Catherine, d'un mot, on peut...
And here, what do you think there is a parallel with France, in the sense that the e-cigarette is exclusively or mainly for smokers, and you do not have a linked effect of vape towards tobacco, mainly for youngsters? It is a tool which will, create a different impression for tobacco.
Because obviously, as a responsible industry, we have to be very responsible and not sell to children and young people. But equally, as Professor Jerry Stimson said at an event recently, why should we limit harm reduction to adults only? Why shouldn't children and young people deserve some harm reduction? If they've already started smoking before they're 18, does that mean that they shouldn't get any help? It's a very difficult question, and it's not one that we can, we can't go that route, but it's a complex moral issue.
D'accord. Et en Angleterre également, la vente...
And also for minors, it is prohibited in England.
Really, we don't yet have a law that mandates it, although that is coming. We are assured that it's coming.
D'accord. Mais aujourd'hui, un mineur peut acheter des cigarettes électroniques.
A minor can buy legally cigarettes in UK, according to the shop.
It is the retailers in the shops themselves who would have to enforce it. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, they don't enforce it at the moment because it's not mandated. But if we can get that mandate, then it would be.
Donc c'est vrai que aussi on voit qu'au...
We can also see that in the UK you have actors which are very important, and they have taken position for e-cigarette, and that has explained its development. And Robert West, for example, and also the ASH Association, which is very important for the struggle against tobacco.
Very fortunate. We do have some leading experts in public health and specifically in anti-tobacco measures, who have, more and more of them are becoming very outspoken advocates for electronic cigarettes. Obviously, they are aware of the need for more research and so on, and everybody would agree we need more research, but they recognize already that with the evidence we already have, there's no debate about this. E-cigarettes must be orders of magnitude better than continuing to smoke. Okay, so Professor Robert West produces regularly the Smoking Toolkit study, which is produced for the government in the UK, and they are currently regulated as consumer products there, so they've recognized that they're not tobacco products, they're not medicinal products, and they have this commitment to tracking their use and assessing how far they may be promoting or detracting from reduction of prevalence in cigarette smoking. And we're lucky that Robert West is one who recognizes that that's actually what matters. When we've got e-cigarettes all over the UK, is that making smoking increase or decrease? That is actually all that matters. So he plots this and gives us lovely graphs like this to be able to play with. So you can see that although we've had significant growth from sort of early 2011 through, it's kind of leveling off now at the moment. Who knows which direction that's going to go? I would imagine it will continue to rise, but a bit more gradually now. But dramatic increase in the total use of nicotine products while smoking. So you've got, all nicotine use has gone up, but obviously e-cigs have displaced some of the NRT use. But then you've also got the fact that you've got, it was reversing a decline in nicotine use among recent ex-smokers. So there had been a drop-off with people just giving up smoking, but not enough, obviously. But now this has kind of reversed that trend. People are recognizing that, yeah, quitting smoking may be great, but actually quitting nicotine is not necessary, because nicotine's not the problem, it's the smoke that's the problem. And that's the really killer slide, in a way, in demonstrating what's happened with e-cigs as opposed to the other aids for quitting smoking, if you like, all of which are medicines apart from the e-cigs, obviously. But there really has been a significant fall off, and thank goodness Champix has fallen nearly right off, because that's a dangerous thing. That said, though, Robert's very keen always to stress the fact that behavioral support is a really key element, and that's where I think this vaping revolution has really got it right, because look at how well supported we all are by each other. This is such a sort of community that's very tightly interlinked, both vendors and consumers all joined together in this fantastic community. And of course, thanks to the internet, we're all able to communicate all over the world. We develop these bonds, these friendships, and there's so much support available on the fora so that everybody can find the support they need. And also we're seeing in the UK a massive increase in the stop smoking services, beginning to talk about e-cigs with their clients, beginning to educate their clients about electronic cigarettes. So that has to be a good thing, because as Robert always says, if you can put the behavioral support together with the e-cigs, that's an absolutely winning combination, must be. So we've seen an increase in the UK in attempts to quit, and also there's been a significant increase in the rate of quitting smoking. It looks as if that's tailed off a bit, but if you look at where it started, it's quite dramatic compared to the last 3 decades of tobacco control measures that haven't really made enough of a difference. So that's his conclusions. That's Robert West's conclusions from the data that he's found on the latest run round. It's done quarterly, so this is always quite up to date. I won't read it to you because you can read it yourself. But it's great to have that data. The other data that we've begun to gather now is data from our own members. Now, this is as yet incomplete, but it gives an idea of the direction of travel thus far. Some of our members are at the larger end of medium, but we've got a lot of smaller companies as well. So the average turnover across all of our members is going to be somewhere in the region of £3.5 million per year. But that's not terribly representative of what each of them's doing, because there's some really smaller ones and some much bigger. But it's interesting to notice in the pie charts there, the emphasis on second generation devices across the membership. So if you look, you've got by far the majority of the devices sold by our members, at least in the UK, are second generation. First generation is still significant, but it's been overtaken by second generation quite significantly.
Catherine, juste peut-être d'un mot sur ce point.
A word on that point. You were dealing with with our Phil Buzardo and American friends, the market which is different from France in the sense that we have more cigar-like and first-generation models which are sold in the UK, and now it is becoming actually different, an evolution, because e-cigarettes are diminishing and so substitute by the new generation, second generation, and mods also.
I think this comes down to the education that's happening from our health professionals, from our public health advocates and so on, because they're doing the research that demonstrates that actually the second and third generation products are much, much more effective at helping people completely switch away from tobacco, and ultimately, obviously, that's the goal. So I think because there's more emphasis on second generation and educating people about good products to use that will help them stay completely away from tobacco, that's why this is happening.
Et les sociétés.
And companies, the ECITA companies working with you, what about cigar-likes people in the Brit market? Is that will that still existing, or what are the perspectives according to you? Will have like 5-10% cigar-likes, or even better, or having the possibility to disappear?
See, the tobacco industry's moved in, and they have a very clear commitment to the cigar-like model, and they're easy to stack on the shelves. They're easy to sell, pile high and sell cheap, So I don't know. I think there's quite likely to be a place for them still. And I think there is a useful role for them in allowing smokers who believe they want something familiar to find that something familiar enough. But then again, when you compare it with what's happened here in France, where the entry point seems to be much more like an ego, what's wrong with that? It works really well. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Maybe it's possible to change it, but I think at the moment, because our market is familiar with the fact that these products are available, people know what to look for, or they think they do, then it's likely that we'll end up still having some, but it's clearly a diminishing proportion. Another interesting comparison, though, if I may, between the UK and France is the fact that obviously you've had your limit set at 2%, 20 mg per mil, for quite some time now. So obviously your market has developed around that. And I know of a lot of French vapers who buy from outside of France because they know they need more nicotine, and that's the way it is. But it's interesting that many more French vapers seem to be okay with vaping lower strengths, whereas in the UK, our limit's always been much, much higher. We have a limit of 7.5%, so 75 mg per mil, until it falls into the poisonous category under the Poisons Act. It's not actually to do with the toxicity, which we'll come to in a bit. But consequently, as you can see on the pie chart on the right of the screen there, although we've still got a huge majority that is under 20 mg, about a third of our market uses over 20 mg. So obviously there are significant differences there, and also obviously significant implications with TPD.
Avec la directive.
With the European directive, we'll deal with that in the afternoon. Maybe a small question, current events. We've seen in the press that we have a company which would e-cigarette like medicine. Ruble is his name, if I'm not wrong. What do you think of that? Is that debate with the ECITA? Is that e-cigarette, or is that a medicine or tool for quitting smoking?
That's the basic thing we need to understand. It would be virtually impossible to license one of these as a medicine. You'd have to break it, redesign it, turn it into something else, and I think that's largely what they've done with that. It's probably going to be a perfectly good product for people that want a medicinal solution. It's definitely the best of the NRT type ranges that we've seen. It's definitely going to be better than a patch. It's better than gum. It's on a par with the quick mist probably. It delivers a mist into the mouth. It's not an e-cig. But I wish them luck with it, and I wish we could see more innovation like that on the medicine side as well, because ultimately it's about helping smokers get away from smoking, and whatever's going to work for people, we should support, I think.
C'est ça.
Yeah. Okay, so, right, the toxicology was the kind of thing I wanted to just look at it, because I think really understanding the toxicology of nicotine is the key, I hope, to unlocking the potential that we all have here with these products.
Et peut-être pour...
And also maybe to make a summary of your work in the last months, ECITA is really at the a starting point of a report which has been made on toxicity of the e-cigarette and liquids which are linked to it. And that report, Vibra report, has an echo on different companies and also with public authorities in Europe. And we have, nice debates on the possible modification of a regulation about toxicity of e-liquids, also due to ECITA.
Something wrong with it. There'd always been confusion about how toxic is nicotine when it's in the doses we're talking about in e-liquid, which are tiny concentrations, as you all know. So we did some calculations ourselves. We couldn't come up with something that was going to be valid, a real answer that would solve it once and for all. So we thought, well, what do? You consult the experts. So we asked a consultancy that specializes in toxicology, they are qualified experts in this field, to examine e-liquids with nicotine in the context of the CPL, the CLP regulation, so that we could get a definitive answer as to how we should do it, because the responsibility for labeling the products rests with the manufacturers, importers, retailers, the people who sell the products. It is your legal obligation to label correctly and to classify it correctly under CLP. So how can you do that if you don't know how to do that, if you don't know what the classification should be? And it seems to have been very different across Europe. I mean, Malta had one set of rules, Holland had a completely different set, we had something different. And it turned out, when we researched this back, it looks, for the UK at least, as if a mistake was made very early on, in around 2008-9, in trying to place it within the previous regulation of chip. And that mistake then, where they were out by a factor of 10, they thought that a 2% liquid contained 20% nicotine. And that then got translated across when it moved to CLP. So these mistakes just got added on and made along and dragged along until we got to the point where it was become meaningless. And it was being classified in the same level as strychnine and really dangerous cyanide, things like that. It was mad. So when we got the report back from BIBRA, we were able to see that up to 2.5%, so 25 mg per mil, that's the entire French market with your 20 limit, is not toxic and is not classified under CLP. That was a shock, to say the least. We were really quite shocked by that. But so we thought, well, hang on, okay, these experts have said that, that's all well and good, but wow, really? Can this be true? So we then asked a variety of scientific and regulatory experts around Europe for peer review on this, so we wanted to check it with them. We asked Ricardo Pelosa to have a look at it, we asked Dr. Luzek, and we asked Bernd Meyer, who is a professor of toxicology, so he ought to know. And the upshot was that, somewhat bizarrely, everyone agreed that this was definitively correct. And we contacted also, obviously, we alerted the Department of Health in the UK, the Health and Safety Executive, who has responsibility for this classification, agreeing what it should be, and the European Commission. And we asked them all for comment. UK Department of Health and the Health and Safety Executive both came back and confirmed it. The Commission doesn't respond. Quelle surprise. Our regulators, though, on the ground in trading standards are now accepting that this is correct. But we are one member state among many, and we need everyone to do it. We need everyone to recognize that this report is accurate. This is new information that's in there now. Everybody needs to know it, and everybody needs to follow it so that you are following CLP as you're supposed to. So we felt that, we have an obligation to make sure that it can be understood properly by everyone. And I recognize that actually some of what we put on our blog about it was perhaps not clear enough, particularly for other countries where English isn't necessarily the first language. So we're in the process now of working on translating a very clear document into French and hopefully into some other languages as well, so that we can really give you information that you can use to inform yourselves and, crucially, to inform your regulators directly at DGCCRF, so that you can get them on side with it, get them to understand that there is this new evidence now. It is right. It's been checked, double-checked, triple-checked, quadruple-checked. It is correct. And therefore, none of the products with e-liquid need to have the toxic hazard symbol with the skull and crossbones. None of them is toxic enough to need that.
Catherine, juste un mot par rapport au rapport BIBRA, parce que
you were dealing with VIBRA report and its conclusion. Of course, we have dialogues with DGCRF in France and public authorities in the UK. Do you feel that VIBRA report is self-sufficient, and do we need more studies, or do you think we shall have new studies to convince public authorities to change the regulation at a European level?
Yes, we have this. We have.
Parce que Catherine est parfaitement.
Okay, Katherine is bilingual in, of course, in French and English, but of course she doesn't need the translation, and she's perfectly bilingual.
Okay, we have another report because actually it was.
Est-ce que le rapport BIBRA aussi?
I mean, does that report is up to date, or shall we have another study to complete it?
Publication per se, it belongs to us because we commissioned it. We have published it, obviously it's out there. But in terms of published studies that support that work, Professor Meyer in Austria had already done, I think he published it at the beginning of this year. Actually, I think it's on the next slide. No, okay. But he published the document about how much nicotine kills a human. You will have seen that, I'm sure. Which really just questioned this whole notion of the LD50 that has been recognized, this magical number that is where half of the people who are exposed to it will die, the lethal dose. And questioned this whole notion of it being 60 milligrams per kilo, which has been generally accepted for some time now. And there's questions about whether it's the rabbit data or the mouse data. Oui. But Bernd Meyer was very, very clear, and everyone else concurred, that it is the rat data that is used by the courts. So we're not actually even talking about the human toxicity level with this. But what was examined was the oral toxicity, so when you swallow it, and the dermal, so through the skin, because those are the classifications within CLP, within the regulation. They're built into the regulation itself. It's just acute oral and acute dermal for nicotine. They don't look at anything else. There's nothing under an inhalation because of the nature of the chemical compound. So but obviously when we got these results back from BIBRA, it was some concern to us because we thought, well, how are we going to protect consumers now? Which I can imagine is something that's probably crossing your minds. And we batted this around the office for a week until we came up with, hang on a minute, protect them from what? It's not toxic. What are we trying to protect them from? But it's a shock to think of it like that, isn't it?
Le rapport BIBRA a été un choc et c'est vrai qu'après...
So Vibra report was a shock, and after rats or rabbits, you were dealing with different products like for food industry or different things. We'll deal with those points in the afternoon when we'll deal with the European regulation for the transposition of that. Well, we need to conclude. Unfortunately, I know that you had other elements to share on your works in ECITA.
Yeah.
Voilà.
Because without the toxic symbols, this is all we decided was needed to make sure that it's
Voilà,
safe.
Il y a aussi un travail en lien avec le rapport.
Of course, there's also work on the labeling, which is not adapted yet and could be simplified. And there, for example, you put the minor prohibition.
D'un mot par rapport à...
ECITA and the future products for end of 2014-15, will it be the transposition of the directive? Et donc, and also the dialogue with NHS?
Not so much the NHS. We're working more on, obviously, at the moment, the standards is a huge part of it because our UK Department of Health has indicated that they want to use our standards work with British Standards Institute to implement the directive. And obviously, for us, it's kind of just keep doing what we're doing because we've always been trying to get the regulation right for the UK and everywhere else. So it's just business as usual, really.
D'accord. Merci beaucoup, Katherine DEVLIN.
Thank you, Katherine. Thank you for coming to Paris and talk about the British market. We cannot ask any questions because we have the other speakers, of course, of the Association of Moroccan Vapors. But, of course, you will be here until tomorrow night.
Merci.